Oh yeah, I didn't check your volume. Can you say something?
Something.
Loud. Okay. Again?
Something.
Okay, this should be good. You're a tiny bit louder than I am, but it's very similar. Okay. Should be good.
Shouldn't scare anybody.
Shouldn't, yeah. Oh, you know what I did today? I spent like 3 hours watching Putin's speech. That was an experience. If you know Russian, I watched it in Russian, of course. You need to watch it in original language. Oh, it was. Do you hear about it?
Uh, I only saw memes about it on 9gag, like something like Putin accusing Ukraine about some aggression, and he's moving in peacekeeping.
Yeah, he basically recognized Donbass and Luhansk regions as independent countries, and at the same time uh, he signed an agreement of bilateral support or something like that. And yeah, and Russia is sending in peacekeeping troops to help against Ukrainian aggression. It's bizarre. The speech was fascinating, though. It looked like, uh, it definitely looked like Tsar called up all his subjects and made a circus, like made everyone dance to his tune. And then he announced that, oh well, everyone seems to agree with me, so you know, I kind of have to do this now. Like, yeah.
Classic Putin.
It was.
I remember seeing a video about him and a board of members sitting around the table, and they all had to sign some, I don't know what it was, but he was like looked at one of the members and said, "Did you sign it?" He's like, "Yeah, I did. Why don't you see your signature here?" And it's like, come here, sign it."
Oh, it was even better this time. This time, one of the ministers that was called up choked when saying, like, basically Putin was asking, so what are you suggesting? Like, he spoken a little bit about the situation and so on. So, and Putin just asked, well, what are we doing? Well, tell me, what's your suggestion? And he started stuttering and like Putin was interrupting him constantly, saying, "Well, spit it out. Say what you want. Do you suggest we start negotiations? Do you suggest we recognize the region?" And he basically, "Yes, I agree. We need to. I support incorporating Donetsk and Luhansk into Russian Federation." That's what he said. And then Putin starts, "Oh, okay, we're not, we're not actually considering that today. Today we're talking about recognizing them as independent nations. Like it's a little bit." So basically, he said the minister suggested annexing basically Luhansk and Donetsk. Yeah, it was kind of funny.
But do those regions really want to be like independent, or is it something that Russia is making up?
That's a good question. Who knows? Well, it definitely has a significant Russian population, so maybe. I guess it is feasible. But there are a lot of, well, it's not really an issue of what people, because well, since they live on the border with Russia, like you have lots of Russian speaking people, and since there's a lot of industry there, you get a lot of migrants from Russia. So a lot of people moved in from Russia because there was work there. So naturally have greater support for Russia. But that's beside the point, because the main thing, the main issue, and I'm not sure, I haven't seen much about this in Western media or in Lithuanian media for that matter. They don't really talk about the Minsk, well, not the Minsk agreement. They keep saying stuff about Minsk agreement, which in much, but basically 28 years ago in 1994, It's when you were okay. So
I happened then.
yeah, you happened then. So yeah, so that many years ago, the Ukraine was actually a nuclear power. It had nuclear weapons, and the U.S., United States, United Kingdom, and Russia agreed. Right? Well, basically signed an agreement with Ukraine that if Ukraine renounces its nuclear arsenal, basically gives all the nuclear weapons away, those countries will commit to helping Ukraine to make sure that its kind of territorial integrity will not be in danger. So basically, if anyone tries to attack Ukraine, those three countries will come to its aid. So that was the agreement. And now we have a situation where Russia basically says, you know, we don't care, pretty much. So Ukraine said that, well, I guess we need nuclear weapons then. If our agreement doesn't stand anymore, well, we can start developing them, I guess, because we kind of need them, since we have very aggressive neighbors. So that's a really big problem that no one seems to be talking about. As you know, nuclear weapons are kind of a big deal. And Russia kind of agreed to preserve Ukrainian territorial integrity, but now it took away Crimea for itself. Now it recognizes Donetsk and Luhansk, and apparently looks like it's gonna annex them and incorporate them into Russian Federation as well. Like, all the people who were supporting Ukraine left long time ago because all when the what would you call it? Basically, when they decided to declare independence, people who didn't agree with that, like, it wasn't, well, allegedly in Western media they say that it wasn't popular uprising. People didn't actually want it, didn't actually support it en masse. And people who didn't support were basically kicked out and ran away into Ukraine, in Poland, well, wherever they could find some place. So majority of Ukrainians actually left. Well, people who could left, and people who supported Russia were happy with the situation because now they have independence from Kiev, which is leaning pro-Europe, so on. So, you know, who knows what people actually want? Like, no one's really asking it.
Yeah, they're like less asking and more like saying, if you agree, okay, you can stay. If no, go away, or we will make you go away.
Seems like that's the sort of situation they're in. So, wait, didn't I create a file? I distinctly remember creating a brother pie. Okay, brother pie. Okay, so this, well, pretty much should work the same way as it works. So, do you have any notes? That's another question, because taking notes is essential. Like, you should have like
Just give me a moment. I have to answer my phone. Be right back.
Ah, okay. Gives me a chance. I look at. Well, this is not really important. Let's do Wordle. A new word is available. Okay. That's group. It's a 5-letter word. O. So O is in the middle, and there is an R. Right. Okay, let's try bank. N. Okay, we have 3 letters. The middle one is O. Yeah. Best four-letter word. City. That's how you actually spell cities, not the word list. The word.
Okay, back.
Right. Trying to solve Wordle at the moment.
Oh, the green one, does it mean like it's first or last letter,
No, it
or
means
what?
it's in the correct spot. The middle one is O. The
Okay.
yellow ones mean it's somewhere. It is present in the word, but it's not in the correct location. Alright. Trying to figure out a 5-letter word from the remaining letters. So I have more letters open.
Is it like you can use a letter only once?
No. Well, but I don't see the point of using the same letters again. Otherwise, like, you're wasting your attempts.
True.
This. Yeah, I don't really know that many 5-letter words. I had the same struggle yesterday. So how about those notes? Do you have any?
No.
You should start writing notes, like basically stuff you figure out. So you have like a quick reference place where you can look up what you already know like for sure. So if you like, for example, if you know how certain, getting back to yesterday's, I forgot to mention when you talk about for loops. I guess I can drop this Wordle thing for now. Right, so when you have a for statement, for example, you have a list. It's a list. List hour. Define it as whatever sequence of numbers, and you go for in this hour. Print x. Right, when you have this form, like it's a lot more intuitive. If you can read it, the for statement as something like a sentence saying for each x in list, whatever list is provided. Then it kind of makes sense. So for each element in the list, do this, or whatever the for loop is.
Okay.
So it kind of makes sense that way. Right. One thing I didn't show you yesterday is boolean values. So basically, it's like a special keyword. So let's say we have I'm not sure. Usually, well, it's more intuitive if you start their name with is, because that's what they usually, well, it's a lot more readable that way. Usually. I'll show what you mean. like is valid, for example, and you can have assign a value true or false. So you can do the same is valid equals false. So true and false are basically keywords, and they're basically a boolean value. So if you the type of, trying to remember what was the built-in method, type of valid type of, it's not recognized. Have here built-in method type of is type type object, right? So this print, if we print what it returns, it should return boolean, because boolean basically means true or false value. Basically a flag. Well, you can call it a flag because it can only be either true or false. So yeah, class bool. So it's of the type bool. And it prints out a bunch of stuff. Set them up. Right. So there's another built-in method type that you can use to get the type of the method. Also, you can just make a breakpoint, and if you run, you'll see that x is an integer and is valid bool. So it is a boolean, indicating that it can only hold either true or false. Well, where is this useful though? You might ask. It's
Exactly my thoughts.
Yeah, so it is actually very useful because there is another statement I want to teach you today is if statement. If statement is basically, well, it's very self-explanatory. If is valid for, so if, and it takes, much like for loop, it needs to take an iterable element to iterate over. If statement needs to take a boolean expression, like something that evaluates to either true or false, and based on that it can go into one branch or it can go into it can do the thing optionally. So basically on some true or false value it can decide whether to do this or that. So that's how you would branch off your code. Let's say if is valid, we can do print valid or something. Let's say since it is true, it will print out valid, then, and we can have also if comes with, you can attach, you can like chain them up with else if. Elif. Well, in Python it's short. Well, they use a shorthand, like a short form. Instead of writing else if. Maybe you can write else if. No, it doesn't look like it. In the sense else, but it doesn't stand else if. So basically, else if will evaluate another expression. Is, I guess evaluating the same thing doesn't make sense. I guess we can have another value. Good. It's true. Well, have like this. The print says good. And we can have an else statement, and else can be used at the very end, like for all other cases. So basically it will check if this is true, it will execute this, then if this is false, then it will check the next thing, and if this is true, it will do this, And if none of them, it doesn't satisfy any of the conditions, it will execute whatever will be written in else. So for example, print I don't know what it is. It is print. Right. So I rerun it. Oh, it's a breakpoint. Run it normally. So I don't really want to print the whole list. So yeah, this is valid. So if valid is true, we'll make it to false. And now it will execute the other branch. Oh, it says I don't know what it is. Oh, I check is valid instead of is good. Good. Okay. And now this is good. And if both are false, then yeah, I don't know what it is, basically. So any questions? How ifs work? Is that clear enough?
Yeah, I think it's clear. It's just you're telling the program to check something, and if that um what's the word for it? I forgot. But
Boolean?
if something if that is satisfied, it will do what is written, and if you have, like you said, else if, then it will check other
Yeah.
parameters. Can I call it like that? I
Uh,
don't know.
I think you can call it expressions. So basically that expression that can be evaluated to be true or false. And there's quite a few of them. In the tutorial, it's the if statement. To show it, will give a bunch of examples. So yeah. Well, I guess that if is very short. For is a little bit more. Yeah, there's a little bit more about for. Range. Right. Let's see. Okay, it must have been in the previous chapters. Let's take a look. More control flow. This. Okay, maybe you don't have that many options that evaluate to true or false. Well, this is the one of them. But this is while. While works in a very similar way. But we're not going to while yet. So yeah, well, I guess this is the main use. Well, not the main use. It's one of the more common uses, is to check if certain value, let's say we have value val equals to 5, and then you can, instead of having a true or false statement, you can write a whole expression that can evaluate to true or false. For example, if 5 is more than, not value, or value, for example, then you can write print val is less than 5, and then you can check else if if 5 is less than value. I guess I'm doing it backwards. I should check value against 5. Value is less than 5, and because I'm writing the same way. It's a little bit natural to do it the other way around. Now, it's more than 5. Right. But you can do it both ways, like it doesn't really matter. Val is 5. Typing print again. Then you can also check if it's equal to 5. So if val is equal to 5, and if you want to check equality, basically there is a very small but very significant difference when you write double equal or you write single equal sign. Single equal sign means assign value to something. So when you write val equals 5, that assigns 5 to the variable. And when you write double equal, it actually tries to compare them and see if they are equal.
So it counts it even in the middle of the line? Like it would, if that was only a single equal sign, it would think that you're trying to assign something to that, well, whatever you're writing.
Usually, yes. If you're trying to, well, you don't usually have it in the middle of line. In certain languages, yeah, it distinguishes based on the context. Like if, as you said, it's in the middle of something else, and it makes sense that you try to compare something, then it might, well, in other languages, it might consider it a comparison based on the context. And assignment when it's at the very beginning. Like when you have an expression and then you have a variable, like you compare expression to the variable, then it will assign the value. But this will always, in Python, this will always just assign a value. I don't really have a good example. I think if you try using assignment where it expects comparison, so for example, if I do it here, it says that it will complain that there is no actual expression. But I guess if I do this, bool, try to convert the value to boolean, it will pass because else if checks for actual expression. And the expression that it's trying to evaluate is an assignment. So for example, if I assign, say we have 8 here. Yeah, this is odd. This won't work, okay. Let's have it 5 and assign it 8. After it's done, let's print 8. Not 8, the value. Write a string. So after comparison is add value. Right. So this should work. Boolean takes no keyword arguments. Wait. So must be a built-in function. I thought it was just tries to convert whatever you give it to Boolean value, evaluate it to true or false. Bool takes x, return a Boolean value. One of true or false, x is not using the standard truth testing procedure. X is false or omitted. No, it's false. Otherwise, it returns true. It should return true. Oh, right. So it thinks. Okay, this is this is beyond the scope. Like, we can talk about it later. Basically, it thinks that I'm giving it a parameter val, explicitly saying that when I call Boolean, I want to assign a parameter named val, value 8. But Boolean doesn't actually take keyword argument. Like it doesn't take, it takes no keyword arguments. So there is nothing to assign the value to. So that's basically why it's complaining. How can I do this? I just do this. It won't work. Yeah, it's very hard to use it in a situation where it's just not an assignment in the middle of something else. Because that's usually not a desirable thing. Yeah, I can't even think of a situation where you would want to assign something in the middle of something else. Unless you can think of something.
Not really, because what's the point of assigning something to something in the middle of the line when you can just write a new line?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. Well, you can use it like this, but this will mean an assignment in when you're calling a function, pretty much. But right. So boolean, yeah. So it does. So when we compare it to 8, let's see. Compare it to 5. Well, it equal to 5. It says val after comparing is 5, val is more than 5. Oh, didn't change the text. Val is equal to 5. Now if I execute this, val is equal to 5. So basically it skips the things before. I guess we can do the debug thing. Like it's very easy to see what happens. So it evaluates and this evaluation fails, so this doesn't do anything. It tries to evaluate this condition, it fails, so it goes to the last one. This one doesn't fail and it executes that.
Okay.
And you can have an else statement at the end as well, and print this will never happen. Oh, this should never happen. And you shouldn't say never, but
Never say never.
yeah, this shouldn't happen. This should not happen because it doesn't make sense. Well, unless it's not a number, maybe. Let's try assigning it. Might actually evaluate equal to 5, but probably not. Yeah, you can't compare strings and integers. Okay. Oh well. So yeah, this will basically, this is a dead code that will never get reached. So, like impossible state. Right. So we know how if statements work. Any questions?
Oh, none so far.
And are you taking any notes? You'll be taking notes when you figure something out and just mark it out. So like think of yourself in like a week or so. If you want to call back whatever you learned now, what would be the minimal amount needed to remind yourself? I think that's a good attitude to have when making notes.
Yeah, but you know, it feels to me like as if the if else are pretty easy to understand and they're
Yeah.
really self-explanatory.
Yeah, that. Okay. That is a good point.
Though
Right.
I will start making notes and I will add some notes for 4. I think. No.
Yeah, 4
4.
is a good. I think like you maybe just make a note that 4. It's supposed you can read it as 4x in an array or list. Do this. Like it translates into like for each element x in list y, do the following, something like that. Which is also kind of self-explanatory. I didn't explain it all that well yesterday. I just after I finished, I went to bed. I thought, oh, that's how you're supposed to read the for statement.
Yeah, the lack of that one word really kept confusing me.
Yeah. Right. So the next thing about loops, it's gonna be loops again, because if is for controlling flow, so you can branch it off, go this way, do this or that, and while is very similar to if, but instead of executing it once, it will keep executing until the condition, while the condition is true. For example, while x eval more than 6. There's another, well, I guess we can combine. Yeah, we can assign val a new value. by calling input. Yeah, input. I'm pretty sure input is the thing I'm looking for. Basically, it will ask for the user to input a value. And you can write out enter new value. No notification today. Oh, sorry, completely forgot about that. I am really sorry. Completely forgot to send out notifications. Yeah, well, you're the only one online. Okay, I'm sorry, Risk.
Okay, welcome back.
Right. Let's see. Yeah, while new value. So it will keep executing until I casually checked which and found you. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. Sorry again. I completely forgot about it. We started talking about Russia and yeah, it slipped my mind. I started talking about Russia. Let's see. So if I run this, well, it's more than 6. Oh, it wasn't more than 6 because it was 5 initially. It just didn't execute it. More than 6 to continue. Basically, it's just a text, a string that will be outputted and asking for input. Okay, let's make it 8, for example, to begin with. Value is more than 5. Please enter a new value. More than 6 to continue. So if I enter 9. Oh, it thinks it's a string, right? String. I'm trying to compare a string because all the input is always read as a string. So if I want to convert it to other type, if I'm expecting it to be an integer, I can do int that. So this is called casting. Casting is a process of converting one type of variable into another type of variable. So for example, input is always read as a string, no matter what you input. If you input a number, if you input a text, if you input true or false, it doesn't matter. It just accepts it as a string. If you follow camel case while naming variables in Python, I never use it. Well, camel case makes it a little bit easier to read, so that's why I always use camel case. Just seems like I don't follow camel case when I'm naming packages or files. Files and folders, yeah, I just name them lowercase all the time. Always. Yeah. Right. So casting is a very simple concept, just converting. And for casting, there are a couple of built-in methods to convert from one basic type to another basic type. Let's see, go to built-in functions. So we have int. So basically, this is returns an integer object constructed from a number or string. So if you give it a number of some sort, it could be a floating point number. A float is another type of number. So if you take a string and you know it's a floating point number, meaning it has fractions or decimal points. Yeah, basically that's a floating point. Integers are just whole numbers. I think we talked about that.
Oh, we covered that yesterday.
Yeah. And there's another str. So basically, if you want to take a number and convert it to string, then you use str, because certain places require you to provide a string. They don't take in numbers, so they will complain. So that's how you do it. So to do that, we can do this just to illustrate it a little bit clearer. Value. We read the new value, and to do the casting, we can do a casting while as well. Basically, when you cast, it converts into the new variable, but it doesn't change the value of the original. So basically, if I do this, so I want to cast it to integer. So I do int with a new value, provide new value as a parameter. So basically, it will return a result of whatever this function does, but it won't change the value of new value. New value will stay a string. So if I run it in debug, it now shouldn't complain. Yeah, it just says, yeah, please input new value. Oh yeah, and less than 4. Started. Input 9. Okay, now it stops. So, oh wait, stepped over. Again, 9. So I see it read the input. New value is a string. I need more strings, or more code to actually step over. Oh, there's a nice hack or keyword. Oh, by the way, did Millafro got his assignment done? Yeah, I did it. Well, I did it. Pretty much. So he asked for help, so I decided to help him out. Because he didn't have time and he had family emergency, so he couldn't, well, basically personal issues. And he couldn't have time to actually do it himself. So, you know. Usually I wouldn't do that, but yeah, I made an exception. Also, he basically donated me, sent me $50 for that over PayPal. So you know, as a token of well, for as a thanks. That's what we agreed on, like that. Well, we agreed that it's not paying for the job, it's just a token of appreciating me helping him, and I would have helped him regardless if he paid him or not. So, you know, it's like that sort of arrangement. Right. So I read the value, and it actually stopped here. So if I execute this, tasks to enter the value, treats, so new value is a string, it will cast it into integer and assign it to val. Let's see, val is now an integer, 9, and new value is still a string, which is also 9. Oh, that was dessert. Well, okay, well. Thank you, I guess. I'm not sure if it was dessert, like I didn't do anything special. It was a very simple assignment, just to create a couple of modules and import them and call a function to convert miles to kilometers and kilometers to miles. Like, it was a very trivial task. So, but yeah, hopefully it helped. Well, it should have helped, sure. I'm sure I will hear from him again. Time equals money. Yeah. Well, not everyone's time is worth that much. Simple rule. Yeah, it is a rule. Can't say that. Let's see. So hopefully this is kind of clear how it works. If I input 10, value is 10, value is still 9 until I cast and convert it. Well, casting is converting and assign it. Now it's integer 10. Alright, any questions?
Could you repeat the last part, like, oh,
About what?
okay, new value input. Okay, you input something. Oh, and then value, the line below it, that converts it into an integer?
Yeah, well, this call, there are a couple of calls for casting. So there's one int for converting something to integer, whatever value. If this is supposed to be an integer, but it's like in a different form, like you have a floating point number or a string, but you want to convert it into an integer, so it would actually be seen as of type integer, then this is how you can do that.
Now I get it. Like when you write new value equals input, that accepts it as a string, and then it casts it into an integer, right?
Yeah, input returns a string, and then int converts it from a string into an integer. Same
Okay.
goes for, there is a str method as well, which does the same thing, but converts it to string. So if I give val, it will convert it back to string. And there is float val. It will do the same float, pass along the value you want to convert. And even there's a boolean version. Val. So all of these methods, all they do is take the value and convert it to another type of variable, even though they will be all operating on val.
Okay, we know what integer does, what string is, what boolean is. Also, it checks only if it's true or false, right?
Yes.
Okay, then we still don't know what float does.
Float is another type of number. So basically there are two types of numbers. Integer is a very basic number. It's a whole number. But there are more numbers that are not whole would be floating point numbers.
We did cover that. Yeah, now I remember.
Yeah.
Fractions and stuff.
Right. So sometimes you have see, like, what could be a good example? Let's divide the value by, say, 8, maybe 3, and we convert it to integer. So basically division will result in, well, if you enter maybe I should do something. Not sure what's a good example. Do you have any suggestions? What would you like to see clarified? Let's see.
Don't even know because you already explained boolean, integer, string, float. Well, I think I understand it. Like you would use it instead of an integer when you have rational numbers. If I understand it correctly.
Repeat that last part. Use integer or what?
No, you would use float instead of an integer when you have rational numbers.
Oh, rationals, you mean the not whole numbers?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not sure what is rational number, to be honest, so...
I think they're called rational numbers. I'm also not sure right now.
Probably you're right. Let's say you're right. Divided by 3 with this is... So this should illustrate the same thing. So if I enter 8, divided by 3, so... Oh, not integer value. Divided by 3. So if I enter 8 and it tries to divide 8 by 3 and gets 2 point something something, guess we can do the same thing twice. Divided by 3, that I don't convert here. 8. So you see actual value is 2.6666, but if I cast it into an integer, it just removes the irrelevant part. That's how the casting to integer works. If you cast it from floating point number to an integer.
Okay.
So it doesn't actually round it up or down. Well, there are other functions that do that, but the int one, when you cast from into the type integer, doesn't really take that into account.
It just takes the whole number and that's it.
Yeah, well, the whole part of the number. Right, and boolean, yeah, it just evaluates if it's true or false. Or actually print it out. Val. That will, well, it will evaluate to true pretty much, because anything that isn't, I think for it to evaluate to false, it has to be either the string false. I think this will be evaluated as false. Not really sure actually. No, it even even string false evaluates to true. So it has to be either nothing or none. I think if, well, none means nothing. Basically use none when you need to provide a value, but you have nothing to provide. So it's like a placeholder, empty placeholder that has no value. So if I pass along none, yeah, it evaluates to false now. Also, I think 0 evaluates to false as well. Remember, yeah, 0 is false and 1 will be true. Well, I guess any number that's more than 0 will evaluate to true. Yeah. So there are odd ways you can convert from one type to another, and yeah, then you can use those conversions in with if, while, to construct some logic around it. Right. So hopefully that's all clear so far.
Only Boolean kinda confused me a little bit because it's either true or false, but you, there's nothing written as far as I see to say it, like if it's more than 0 then it's true, if less then it's false.
Yeah, that part is done in Python itself. So in Python internals, you can read about it in Python documentation. So it's all explained here. If you go to the all built-in functions that we are currently using, among them you have listed bool, which is here. So if you go here, it says that it returns, it's basically true or false based on whatever you provide. And it uses something called truth testing procedure. And if you click on it, and it basically explains that by default, object is considered true unless its class defines another method, either a bool method that returns false. Okay, there are ways to make it evaluate to false, basically by declaring special methods. We'll talk about that, but why does it call methods? It should be functions. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay. Or yeah, the most of the built-in objects consider false. So none and false. So basically, if you provide the value false, basically a boolean value false, and try convert it to boolean, it will evaluate to false, or none. So if you provide nothing. 0 of any numeric type. So 0 or 0 in floating point. 0j, I have no idea what type of format that is. Decimal, 0, fraction, whatever. I'm not. I don't even know what fraction is. I don't really care. I could go and read up if I really wanted, but I haven't really found a use for it yet. Maybe because I don't know it. Maybe that's why I didn't find any use for it. Definitely a possibility. Empty sequences and collections. So if you have an empty string, well, this is a tuple. Tuples are odd, so I guess we'll get them eventually. So this is an empty list. Empty square brackets as well. Set, range. Okay. Well, range basically creates a range of numbers. Basically, you take, well, you can go and read about range because it's one of the built-in methods. So range, what it does, returns. Range is actually an immutable sequence type. Right. Ranges. So if I create a list using range, it will create a list with all the numbers in the range. Okay. Interesting. So this is like some sort of special object, Python, that creates basically a sequence of numbers. And also you can provide it with a starting value, with a end value. By default, if you provide only one number, it's basically an ending value, and it starts from 0 and increments by 1. Also you can, yeah, if you want, you can start with 1. So basically if you provide 2 values, it's a starting and an ending value. And if you provide 3 values, it's basically starting value, ending value, and a step. So it will increment by the step, starting from whatever end, yeah. So this is a way to get a bunch of, well, a sequence of numbers. very easily, which I guess you might need sometimes. I don't usually I don't really use it. Like, yeah, it's very rare you would need something like that. Maybe when you're working with well, with big data or just parsing data, maybe then it's useful, which I don't usually do. Right. So what we were talking about? Kind of forgot.
Yeah, I asked why it equals true if it's more than 0.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's fine because it's just how Python is. In other languages, yeah, the rules for boolean would be different because in Java, if I remember correctly, if you provide anything, it will evaluate to true. So unless it has to be either it will evaluate a string false to false, but otherwise any other string will be true. So it has like there are different variations of how to convert different types to boolean, but you know, not really all that relevant. All that, and it's rare you need to use this. Usually you care about the actual value or not whether it is there or not. I guess that could be useful as well. So basically, you don't know if the value is here. You can write if and then the value, the variable, and then execute that. Say print value is present. You can actually list the value. So this is like a nice check to see if the value is set. Because if a value is defined, comment this out. So the value was never defined. Or actually we can define it as none. Because that's what the default would be. Usually. Well, we'll talk about functions. There are lots of situations where you can get a variable which is actually none. Basically, it doesn't have any value assigned. Well, it has none value assigned, but none is like a special value that indicates that it doesn't have a value. If that makes sense.
So, yeah, because like we talked about it yesterday, 0 is still a value in Python.
Yes. None is also a value, but indicates that it's not a value. Odd. Well, it could be considered odd. Don't know what it is. Oh yeah, so this is if not valid. Right, so you see this code didn't execute because the value is none, so it didn't actually print out value is present and it's valid. If I set it to something else, it will actually print out value is present, and so it's like could be a nice way to check if the value is present. Basically, if you rely on certain value being there, this is how you can check if it's present. Just if, and if it's none, then it will evaluate to false, and if it's anything else, it will evaluate to true. Otherwise, well, unless you can accept an empty string, I think empty string will evaluate to false, right? So this won't execute, yeah. And what else? 0. The value is actually set, but the if statement doesn't actually accurately check for that. But usually don't check the primitives, because these are primitive types. Usually we care about complex objects that we define ourselves. Right. Any questions? Is everything clear?
Seems so.
Clear today's Wordle? I tried, but yeah, I stopped. This is the situation with Wordle. And yeah, well, I guess I'll get back to it eventually. Right. Okay, if everything is clear. So the next big thing I wanna teach you, and it's kind of important, like it's a big step forward, would be talking about functions. So So, do you know what functions are? Or do you understand? Maybe you haven't some knowledge. I'm not sure.
So those, the print, else, if, all those aren't functions?
Yeah, they are. Pretty much. They are built-in functions. That's why they're called built-in functions, because those functions are provided with the language itself. Yeah, the whole section is called built-in functions. So these are the built-in functions. But the point is, you usually make your own functions, and you do that by writing def statements. So basically, def means I'm defining a function instead of, so it's like a special keyword as well. And then it has a function name. Function name, you see it's even colored differently. So after a function name, you have brackets, and in brackets you specify what kind of parameters you want to accept in your function. Let's say string. No, actually, let's text. So you declare a function like this, named function name, which accepts a parameter named text. Right. And now you can actually use that text parameter inside the function. So the scope looks a little bit like in any like if, else, or whatever statement. Like basically it has to be indented with a tab, like this. So it means it's inside the function. So, for example, you can do print variable of text variable is, you can use text, that. But the thing about functions is if you run this, nothing happens, because this is only the declaration of the function. To actually execute the function, you need to call it, much like you need to call print and other functions like built-in functions. So and how you do it, it's pretty much the same way. You just call function name, and you provide text, and since it expects, well, I guess it can accept anything because it will just print out with a value. So I can pass along a number, then it will say value of the text variable is 5. If I pass along some text will print out value of the text is some text. Right. Is that clear? Does that make sense? It should make sense.
It does. Like, if we're talking about the program as if we're in debugging mode, so it runs a couple of lines, it defines the function name, what it should do, and then you're just calling it to do what it's supposed to do, what you told it to do.
Actually, if you look at the debugger, right, some pass is just a keyword, just do nothing. Pass means like do nothing too much. So it will execute this line, but it will just do nothing on that line. So it just gives us somewhere to put breakpoints on. So give him an exercise where we create a function which prints hello and his name. Oh, hello world. Hello every time. I'm not sure if you want to do exercises like that. So if we step, like we are on this pass statement now. Oh, actually I didn't run it in debug. Oh, boy, can't put the breakpoint on pass? That's annoying. Thought you can. Well, I guess pass doesn't do anything then. In certain situations you want, well, for example, if you define a function, it is required that the function would have a body, so this is the body of the function. So if I define another function, for example, def function, and doesn't take any parameters, for example, it will throw an error because this function doesn't have a body, so it has to have, so you can use pass, so it just to provide like an empty body which doesn't do anything. But the thing is, what I wanted to show you, if you run this in debug, it won't actually go into the function itself when you define it. It will read this line, the definition line, and it will recognize that, okay, we have a function which takes these parameters, and that's it. But it won't actually go and check what it's supposed to do. It will just go read to the next line, finds another definition, and now it will execute. Now it will actually go inside this function and print out the value.
Okay.
So it's pretty much what you said, but slightly different. It doesn't actually check or go through whatever will be is in the function right off the bat. It will just on demand, it will go inside the function and see what needs to be done.
When it's called, it will do that.
Yeah. So yeah, and you can have multiple parameters. So you can have text. Not really good with names. Text too. Usually when you don't have a problem you're solving, like another value, so on. So now it takes three arguments, and if I try to run it, it will complain that it takes function name missing 2 required arguments, text2 and another value. Okay, I have a question. What if I define hundreds of functions on top while the program remember them until they called? Yeah, they will remember all the definitions. I have a question. What if I defined hundreds of function top? I didn't understand the question correctly. Yeah, basically it will memorize all the functions. It basically has an internal map. Python has, well, map is okay. So we talked about lists, right? So list is defined like this, and list is just basically a bunch of values. Another structure is a map, and map is actually, well, map is a dictionary. I think in Python it's called a dictionary. Or is it called a map? I don't remember. Basically, in certain languages it's called dictionary, in certain languages it's called a map. But it's the same thing. The thing is, it's very similar to list, but instead of each value being placed at an index, it's placed at another value. If that makes sense. So, for example, let's say we have a map, and we create a map using dictionary method. So much like we create a new empty list by calling list method, this will return an empty list and assign it here. The same will be done with dictionary. So I create a dictionary and I assign it to my map variable, and now to actually add values, I don't, well, I use the same syntax actually, but instead of providing a number, oh no, actually you don't do that. With the list you append values and it just adds them up. And with a dictionary you can assign, say, name will be every, for example. Oh, string. Right. Now this should be thoroughly confusing. Right, maybe I should look for a more simpler example, a primitive example. Or did you understand what I was trying to convey? You still here?
Yeah, still here. No, I didn't really understand.
Okay, let's see. Lists are here. Dictionaries. Basically, dictionary is a different type of list. Well, you can see it as a list, not actually a list. Data structures, sets, lists, dictionaries. Okay, we have dictionaries. So they give this example. So this is how you define a dictionary, like a quick and dirty way to define a dictionary. Like this is how you're supposed to initialize a new dictionary. Just calling dic method, and it will return an empty dictionary. But if you already have like a quick and dirty way, would be just using curly brackets and just saying that this dictionary for, let's say, key would be name, value will be every, and then it's to be a string. Well, it doesn't have to be. They don't have a variable defined every. Then I can say that the next element in the map will be assigned to the key. So basically, key is like an address of a variable. So you know how list indexes values from 0 to however many values you have?
Yeah.
So dictionary assigns in each value a name or an address, and that address can be anything else. So that's why it's called a dictionary, because you have one value and you can convert, like, get another value from it. So that's why it's called a map and a dictionary, because they function in a very similar way. It maps one value to another value in one sense, and it also can be like a dictionary. Like you can have like Lithuanian name word, for example, Talas, right? And then the English version translation would be table, right? So now what's the benefit? Like what's so cool about it is, let's hide that. So for example, I can do something like this. So the useful thing about this, well, it's not that it's very useful, but it's very similar to how you call a list. But instead of needing to know an index, you need to know its key or address. Well, not really an address. Address is something else in programming, but yeah. So for example, if I print my map, value from my map, and I provide the key, it will print out table. Function, oh yeah, it's still missing variables. Let's do this later. You see, it prints out table because the value was assigned, value assigned to the key stylus is table. So, and we can extend this dictionary to include however many elements you want.
But it will only print out the next thing that you wrote. Like if you wrote something else, like, yeah, if you write table, then it will give you the next one, right? Or no?
Oh, so if you're asking if I print out the value of table, right? Like this?
Yeah.
So it will say that it doesn't exist. So there is no such key, because it doesn't go the other way around. So basically, this is the key and this is the value. So it comes in pairs. So it's one-way dictionary. So you can't just, it's like a basic dictionary. Like you can't really use Lithuanian to English dictionary to convert to translate from English to Lithuanian.
No, I was thinking that it was like not pairs, but like a chain. So
Yeah. It's not a chain. It's basically a bunch of pairs, and one value of the pair is the key. It's called the key because that's what you use to find the actual value, and the other part of the pair is the value. So if I enter there, I get a chair, because that's what is assigned to that key value pair. And that's why it's called a map or a dictionary. Like, both work, like both mean pretty much the same way of storing data. So basically in key value pairs.
Okay.
So this is a map. Right. Well, you might think what's so cool about maps and why it's so because it's used everywhere pretty much. It's a very cool thing because if I decide to assign a new value, for example, I can just go and say map, and suddenly say key for value key stylus, I assign a new value. It will be, what would be another? Is there a synonym for table? Say workbench. Right. And then if I read the value from stylus, it will say workbench. So basically the thing is you can't really have duplicate keys, because if you try to assign something to the same key, it will overwrite the value.
Okay.
So that's the benefit of maps. It's basically you can, if you set a value, you can always know that the value will be set for that key, and if you're getting a value, you can for that key, you know that this is the only value available for that key, and also you can be sure that you can't insert multiple key pairs with the same key. So
Because only the last one will count.
yeah, only the last one will. Well, basically they all will execute, but only the last one will actually be stored for future use. Right, so functions. Okay, another thing about functions is yeah, there are lots of different things you can do with function definitions, but one of the things that is kind of useful is assigning default values. So if I do an assignment in the definition of the function, so for example now it has 3 arguments and it says that all 3 values are required and it's missing 2 of them. I can provide new values when I'm calling the function. I have like another value, another text, and I guess I can assign a number, print all of them out here, just 2. Another value. Right. So now I'm taking 3 arguments, 3 parameters, and I'm using all of them. So basically inside the function those parameters become like, well, you access them as any other variable, but outside the function they won't be accessible because it's like used for the internals of the, and well they're defined and live or are present only while the function in the function body. So since the body only contains 1 line, then yeah, after 1 line they are all destroyed and not accessible.
Okay, so if you use map in your own function, you can assign the same map to a different what was it called? Map and
Key? Or what?
Yeah, key.
I'm not really sure what you mean by this.
Well, like you have a function of your own function name. So if you in that function define map stylus as table.
Oh, talking about this.
Yeah.
So, stylus. I make it table again, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think will happen?
Then it should write out 2 things like that stylus is table and stylus is workbench.
Well, since I printed before, I guess I can add it here as well. Make a whole string. Value for stylus. Stylus value. That. So, well, it should have different quotes. And inside the, well, when you're using mixed quotes in a string, you like, if you want that string to contain a quote, you need to use different type of quote. That makes sense. That's why you have two of them. You have single or double quote, because that way you can mix and match them. Yes.
Yeah, because if you use the single one, it thinks that the string ends there.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and it executed and says that stylus is stable. And workbench, oh yeah, it was workbench here. And now when I executed the function, now it became table again.
So technically you can assign different keys to different maps to different keys, but they're not the same.
You can't, pretty much, because what actually happens if let's go with a debugger. So yeah, we define our map, then we assign a new value to stylus, and we print it out. So it's workbench. Then we define the method definition. That's all good. Another method definition. Then we call the function. Our function. Oh, right. So it's F5 to go inside the method. So now it starts executing this. And since map is not part of the variables that you provided, only these variables will be destroyed after the function ends, because these are like a temporary function, internal function variables that I can use inside the function to do whatever I need. And after that, they won't be accessible, at least by that name. Because, well, but map was actually declared outside the function. And when I access it, I actually modify this map outside the function. So it doesn't mean if something is happening inside the function, it's just isolated to that function. You can actually interact with stuff outside that function.
Okay.
So now when I print it out, it prints out that it's a table because it took the map and updated the value of stylus to table.
Okay.
All right. Hopefully that's.
Yeah, that's clear. It's still the same map, but yeah, it counts the same as the first two map functions. Like,
Yeah, it does the same thing. So basically, when you call a variable, for example, there could be a situation where you have a map as well here in the variables, and let's say I pass along a map which has also key. Oh. Okay, let's declare a new map, which is, well, this is a lazy way to do this. And we do this. Say workbench. That. And I call the function. I do print the value of stylus again. Right. I take map. And this map should be okay. So now I think it will understand that this map doesn't actually refer to this map, it refers to this map, which is different, even though they are named the same. So what I expect, I can do this here before as well. So we get workbench, we be table and workbench again. So how this actually happens is, so how it decides what kind of variable, which variable you actually reference here. So it basically goes in like an onion, it goes in layers. The first layer, well, usually you start the closest to wherever it's being used. So this would be the first scope. Well, scope is basically the one continuous line of execution, like in the same space. It's not actually space. Scoping is a little bit more. It's about where it's being executed. So basically, a function has its own scope. So, and well, cycles, while statements, if also have their own scope, but it's a little bit different. Remember actually what are the strict rules about scoping. Actually define that in their tutorial. Scope. Python scopes and namespaces. Thanks. But yeah, basically there are a couple important scopes to keep in mind. So when you have a function, it has its own scope. Then the function can be inside something called a class. So that will have another function. Class will be in the file, so file has another scope. So it will just go in layers. If it doesn't find them, the variable you reference in the local scope, it will go into the scope where the function was defined. So it will go into this scope and look for a variable named map here. And if it finds there, it will use that. And if it doesn't find it there, it even goes somewhere where this is defined. But since this is the source file, like the main file of the program, it doesn't have anything else to check. So this is where it would stop. And like if I reference, for example, something that doesn't exist, the map to, then yeah, it says like doesn't know what it is. It's never defined, so yeah, complaints. It's not defined.
Okay.
Right. Another thing you can pass along, you don't have to pass along exact values, you can pass along map. So what do you think will happen now? Because I take this map and I pass along to this function as its own map.
It should say workbench.
Why?
Because on the 12th line it assigns that map as a workbench.
Okay, so here it will say workbench, right?
Yeah.
What happened next? So it will go up to here. I guess we can just run it in debuggens. So here, yeah, you define a map. Okay, you assign workbench. Connected with Twitch to Discord. Now everyone should be able to see a watch every time. Okay, that's good. That's additional advertising for me. Right. Print. Okay, it prints out workbench. That is correct. It goes to the definition. It goes to another definition. And now it calls the function, but I pass along this map as a function, right? So it prints out current value, which is workbench, because I pass along this as a parameter. Then it updates the value. So, and now it prints out the value is stable. Then the function ends. And now is the question, what do you think it will print out?
Then it should say table, because that was the last definition.
You're right, because when you pass along something to the function, it doesn't make a copy. It takes that object and uses internally. You can just, the difference, well, what I meant when I said that it's gonna be destroyed is if I rename this to something else, like dictionary map, for example, I reference this variable inside the function using this name. That's it. But if I assign that value something from outside, like an object with data or a list, well, actually lists are immutable, if I remember correctly. Immutable means it cannot be changed. A little bit odd, like strings are immutable. I think it's an odd concept, and I'm not really sure what's a good way to explain it. It's not that important at the moment, so we'll get to that if needed. But well, sometimes it might manifest itself in some odd behavior if you don't know what mutable and immutable objects are, but we'll get to that. Right. And mutable is from the word mutate, not to mute. So, mutable means it can change its own value, and immutable means to change its value it needs to construct a new object with updated values. So that's pretty much what it means. So basically, if you want to create a new list, you can't, or you can't just modify a string. When you modify a string, it actually creates a new string and returns that. So that's how you can't actually change the value of a string because it is immutable. It's odd like that.
Okay.
Hopefully that made some sense. Right. Yeah, so this is just the name. So this name will be destroyed, not the variable which was passed along. So how it works is there's a thing called garbage collection, Python. In a lot of languages, it's a very popular thing. In languages like C++ and lower languages like C, you need to actually keep track of the variables you create, because it actually assigns a piece of memory inside your RAM to store the value, and based on the type, it can assign a different length of differently sized block of memory. So if you create an object that can potentially be very large, it will allocate a lot of memory. And yeah, that's where memory leak issue comes from, that people who are programming those lower level programming languages don't manage their variables correctly. So basically they create them and forgot to release that memory. In Python, you don't actually need to do that. It's all done automatically by thing called garbage collector. So basically what it does, it keeps track. So basically when I create this, I assign a value, so it keeps track, says, okay, so this dictionary is referenced by this variable, and that variable is still accessible here in the code when it's executing. So it knows that it doesn't have to, it can't delete or free up this memory that was allocated to store this value. And yeah, and for example, if I pass along the same thing, it doesn't pass along the values, it passes along that reference to the memory. So basically this map and this dictionary map, that's because I pass along this map, the function, basically they point to the same piece of data, but they are just named differently. This dictionary map inside this function and map outside this function both refer to the same data. That's why modifying something inside this function, or not something, that map, dictionary map, will the changes will be reflected in the map outside. So what about garbage collection? Garbage collection, so basically I create a text, here I pass along this value to text. So that text now, so this text is now saved somewhere in the memory, and its reference is saved in this variable inside this function. So when the function ends, there is no variable text. If I try to print outside this function, let's see, even after it's done executing, let's say here, if I try to print say text2, yeah, it complains, it doesn't know what it is. It says it's not assigned because it never was created, never referenced. And by that point, when the function is executed and finished executing, garbage collector knows, okay, this text is a local variable, it doesn't have any other references, so this it will be destroyed basically. So that piece of memory can now be freed up, released, and used for something else. I think it got a little bit more convoluted than it had to. I'm not sure. Did you what did you manage to get from that?
That map works in pairs, not as a chain,
Mm.
and that functions with defined variables in them get them deleted after it's done.
Yeah. Unless you pass along something that's referenced outside the function, then it can be deleted, because garbage collection keeps track how many pieces of variables are pointing to this data. So when you have like a dictionary and you use it outside, you define, modify it, and you're passing along for into another function, then suddenly it's being referenced by two variables. The same piece of data is being referenced by this function variable and this global map variable. And when it's done, even though this variable gets destroyed, but it's just a reference to this piece of data, so it's still being pointed to by this variable, so it doesn't get deleted. Just because something is still pointing at that data, this won't get released because of that by a garbage collector. So basically, garbage collector is something that takes care of releasing memory, so you don't have to worry about memory leaks and so on. That's pretty much the point. It's not that relevant while programming. Just need to be aware of it, that it exists. It does stuff for you. Makes your life easier. Right. Any questions? Any questions?
Got overwhelmed with information.
Right. Oh, we have a question. Okay, risk. Shoot it. So what did you remember? Maybe we can go through whatever you missed. Did you take any notes? That would be the main question.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, what's in your notes? What's the last thing you
Map is pairs, not chain.
Okay. About function definitions, did you take anything about that? About functions, because that's kind of important.
I just noted that def is it's used to create new functions.
Okay, that's good. And then you have variables in brackets. Okay, I'm still waiting for Risk's question to come through. Hopefully it's a good one. Right. Is it important to use C++ in company interviews because it's faster, but I am already comfortable in Python and learning new language takes time? No, it's not. Usually if you're asked to write a solution, they don't really specify which language do it in. Usually they just say do it in pseudo language, like fictional language. So basically you just use the concepts you know, and as long as they make sense, no one will care if it's in C++ or is it in Python, because usually the question is can you actually solve a problem, or not if you can recall all the syntax and nuances how to actually write code in a particular language. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about it unless you're going into an interview for a specific language and maybe they want to check how good do you know this specific language. Then they might care that if you write in C++ or in Python or in some pseudo language that doesn't exist. Right. What else? Oh yeah, another cool thing, when you define variables, you define a function, find how many variables it takes, you can provide a default value. So for example, I define a new variable, and to give it a default value, I can just assign it in the definition. So for example, it will have none value. So now when I execute the function, it won't complain that it's missing arguments. So if I don't assign it default value, it will say, yeah, it's missing one required argument, new var. And by assigning a default value, I'm basically making it an optional argument. And now it doesn't complain. But, okay, let's see. Another print. Var name value is out new var. Right, so this will print out the value of that new variable, and since it's none, it just says none. So new var value is none, but I can pass along value will be something. Okay. Now when I run it, it says new var value is something. So it basically becomes an optional argument. So if I don't provide it, it has this value. If I provide something else, then something else gets assigned that value. So, you know, it is useful in a lot of cases. Any question about that?
Not really, because from what I got, it's like, yeah, sort of like a map, because that's a pair, like new var is that, and then the next function just overrides it.
Yeah, so funny you say that. You can actually use maps as a variable, not like this, not as a single value. So for example, if I can declare a map, say map2, with actual variables, which will be text, have value 1, then I have variable text2, so on. I'll do other text. Basically, let's do this. A little here. Value equal dictionary map. Just anywhere. Let's assign it none in that case. It will be none. Last one will be a 5. Right, so basically I declare a new map that has all the keys correspond to the variables for this function, right?
Yeah.
So now what I can do is, instead of calling function and providing each variable separately, I can do this. I can do function name. Instead of this, I just provide map2, but wait, this. So I put 2 stars and then a map, and it will try to parse out all the map. It will try to use this. Basically, 2 stars indicates that it expands it. It expands this dictionary. So basically, this has to be a dictionary. And yeah, it will basically look for the key. It will try to assign a specific key to the specific variable in the function. Pass along. So if I run it, none type. Oh, I tried to assign a value to none. Not have it none. Let's have an empty dictionary. Dictionary. Will be an empty dictionary. If I run it now, what happens is so it won't happen. So it only does once. So value of the text variable is for stylus. Okay, that's interesting. First of all, and map value for stylus. So it's same thing again. Value for text variable is text1, another text, another value. So this is pretty much, well, you get the point. You can do stuff like that with maps, because you correctly pointed out it looks very similar, it feels very similar. So, and there is actually a way to use that in this way.
So
right.
it's like you write a little bit more before the function so that you can shorten the function.
Yeah. Well, it's not meant for. Well, for example, sometimes you don't actually know what kind of variables you will have. So basically, imagine parsing a document or just receiving data or making requests. So basically your program is running normally, and slowly it accumulates data to the map. And you don't know if you will have this value or not. You don't know if you have this value or not. And you have a function which has all the default attributes, for example. Say this. All of these values have defaults. So you can provide none of the values and it will still run, but it won't really print out anything. Anything of value. And for example, you have something like, so you're missing one value and want to execute, and it will execute with just given this. So it allows you dynamically collect values and pass them along to a function. Like it's just a different way. Like you don't really do this all that often. Usually if you see that being done in some library, because they like to do that, because everything is dynamic and not clear at the time of programming. When you're writing this code, you're not sure what you will get exactly, but this is like a wish list. If I get this, I will do something with it. If I don't, I will just assign a default value and use that. Like basically that's what it becomes. A wish list, what kind of values I would like to get. And I think if you have extra values that don't match to anything, I think it won't complain. It might. I guess we'll find out. What? Well, assign number. Yeah, it actually, it complains that argument not a value is not present in function name. Okay, good to know. Basically all the keys have to be present, but some can be missing if they have default values. So for example, I'm missing text2, so if this doesn't have a default value, it will complain that text2 is missing. Wait, default value following default argument? Oh yeah, defaults. So basically there's another rule. You can't have default value definitions after, you can't, so basically all the default values have to be at the end of the function. So basically first of all, you have to specify variables that are required, and after that you can specify the optional variables with default values. So it's just how it is. It makes, so basically this exists to make it simpler for the Python interpreter to optimize your code. Because if you follow like simple rules like that, then yeah, it makes it easier for the interpreter itself. So now if I run it, it complains that argument text2 was not provided, even though it's required because it doesn't have a default value and it's not actually in the map. Right. Hopefully that's clear. It's not that complicated, but I'm not sure how, it's of limited use as well. Any questions about this?
don't even know, because I feel like a little bit like my head is stopping to work, because it's like I'm asking it to work. It's like I'm trying, but
Okay, are you making your own examples? Are you trying to write your own code? Because maybe that would be an issue if you're just looking at the code and just like listening as if it's in a lecture. Like, yeah.
yeah, I'm trying to do that. Like you said, I'm just listening and trying to make out what's what.
Yeah, I guess if you try to do something yourself with this, so basically now you have understanding of defining functions. You should have understanding how to define a function, how to use a map, a list, how variables work. This is not really all that important, like knowing how to expand the map and provide it as a bunch of variables instead of providing function variables or parameters. You can just expand the map with appropriate values and use that instead, but it's not really all that important. It's not something I use myself. I just know that you can do that. I don't really find use for this feature all that often. It's very rare to get to use that. You kind of need to go out making a situation where it's useful. Otherwise, yeah, just something you can do. But with all of that, I'm trying to think, maybe we could do something, a little project already. Because if you can open close files, read data from the files, and now you can do some logic with them, do some comparison, so on. Maybe we could do some little program. What do you think?
Define little program, because little program to you might be not a little program for me.
Well, something that we need data, first of all. So maybe some log file, maybe a text file, not sure. What could be useful? A spreadsheet, something like that. Because if we get our hands on some data, we could do some a little program that reads that data and does something with it. Preferably something useful. I'm not sure if that's if you can think of anything like that. Maybe you can think about that for the next time, or tomorrow. If you can think of like a file of data, like any data pretty much, we can create that file, extract the data and convert it into a file somehow, maybe. Because I think it's a lot more fun when you're actually doing something that works, and then when you modify it, you can learn how it actually works, or understand how it works. What do you think?
I think trying to do something, and when something works, yeah, then it's like you could call it a motivational boost.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun when you like tweaking something that already works and modifying and seeing the result. Yeah, I can definitely agree with that.
So you said we could use any kind of file, like doesn't matter what kind of information it is.
Well, yeah, pretty much. Well, if it's
Uh,
an image, then you know the reading that data as text will be a bit of an issue. You will have to use bytes, but I guess we can do that as well.
because I think it counts as a small file.
It doesn't
It's
have
a
to be small. It can be large. Like the larger the better. More data we have to videos. Yeah, let's not do it with video editing is a little bit. You were just saying, let's write a hello world application, a function that says hello so and so.
I think it's a little bit too early.
Yeah, video editing is a little bit advanced. We would need like some fancy libraries, and yeah, that would be quite a bit of work. So you had a file in mind, right? What kind of file?
Yeah. Oh, it's just a random file from a game folder. It's some force feedback settings, and it says it has 168 lines, but there are blank lines, so I know 140 lines of something.
I think, well, it would be more fun if you had something useful, something maybe you want to extract data from, something you like, a file that you want to do something with it, not just any random file. We can use any random file, but like if you have like a chat log or something, then we can do an application that goes through this chat log and extracts something you want.
I have something in my Google Drive.
Oh, you do? But yeah, but it doesn't have to be right now. We can do this. You can look for the file and think about what would you like to do
Okay,
for the next time.
quick question. Do PDFs work?
PDFs are kind of hard, but we can convert the data from the PDF. We can just copy paste it into a spreadsheet or any text editor and save it as text that way. So it could work. PDF is a little bit more complicated, like reading the actual PDF. I've never actually done that. It'd be a challenge, but I think it would be a little bit too complicated, at least for you.
Okay, yeah, because I saw that all the info I have it's in PDFs, so not gonna work on
When will you
those.
start classes? I'm not sure. I think classes are, well, object-oriented programming in general is just not necessary for the beginner. But maybe after we make an application, maybe then I can move on to. My concepts are weak on that, so I'll learn. Okay, well, yeah, it won't take long. But first of all, I want to make something practical, and maybe we can build upon that and add new concepts like classes and inheritance, so on top of that. Sorry, I completely missed what you said because I was reading chat.
Oh, yeah. I said that everything I have in Drive is in PDFs.
Ah, okay. Well, as long as you can just Control A, Control C, and copy it to the text file, like that, then it's fine. And parse that. Like it doesn't. Oh, pretty much anything you can think of, I guess. Because pretty much anything you can just drag around and Control C, Control V, and you have a text file with that. And maybe if it's messier, it's better. Then we have more stuff we can do that data, trying to correct it and maybe removing some special characters or odd characters and so on.
Yeah, okay, then I could look around for something because yeah, now that I'm looking at it, it's mostly diagrams, you know, that it's painted and then it has text over it, so only the text gets copied.
Yeah, images are a little bit more messier. I've done some work with images with Python. It is doable. You can definitely, but maybe it's actually a good option. If you can't think of anything, maybe we can start manipulating images. That could be a little bit more interesting, but it's a little bit more work. Like you need a couple of new well, we would need to use library in Python. I don't think it even comes with standard library, so we would need to install it separately. But after that, it will be just using that library to manipulate the image. Yeah, I've done. It's completely doable. I guess that could work. If you can't think of a file, like with, well, text file.
You know, I spend most of my days with hands in something oily, and then when I get home, I just turn on some video game to relax a little bit. So there's basically no important data
What
on my
about
computer.
OBDT or OBD, whatever that connection is named? Don't you work with electronics cars?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so maybe something from there.
I could try getting something from that.
So that may be something useful.
Yeah,
Just
could
an
be.
option, I guess.
Yeah, if even if it's possible, because I have like a work computer, like a tablet, so I don't know how I would extract some logs from that. Maybe it's possible, maybe not. I don't know. Never tried that actually.
Yeah, I probably didn't have a need for that.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, well, see if it's possible. Maybe using Bluetooth or something you can transfer to your phone. That might be possible. Well, it depends on what kind of tablet it is. I guess it's one of those specialized ones meant for car diagnostics. Or is it just a normal, some cheap tablet?
I think it might be even the kind of a specialized one.
Hmm. Well, in any case, you can't. Oh, maybe I'll try to think of some backup data as well.
Okay.
Not really sure at the moment, but yeah, well, we both can think of something. Because you should have enough knowledge to actually make something useful, like an application that can actually like read files, manipulate the data, save the files, something like that.
I don't feel that way.
Well, you'll see. This, well, you just need to know. You just need a correct problem to solve, and you should be able to solve it. You just need to figure out what kind of problem you can solve right now. Just to find a problem that's solvable with these basic tools. Right. So, but I think we were done for today, right?
Yeah, my
You're
my head's totally not working anymore. Like it needs some time off.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you still feel like doing something. Just look through your notes and try to do something like that. Yes. Doing some practice, I guess, would be good. Because if you're just mostly listening to me when I'm explaining stuff, uh, yeah, it might be a bit harder to absorb the information, like understanding the concepts. Because we went through quite a lot of stuff. Went through loops, while we talked about defining functions, apps. Apps are. What else? That's it. Well, it's quite a few new concepts.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yesterday was also kind of full of information. Today also, so yeah.
You know, well, hopefully it doesn't get overwhelming. Because each day, the goal is each day to learn something new in programming, and eventually you will learn enough, you will start seeing the the bigger picture. Because now I imagine everything it looks like. This is simple, that's simple, but I still don't see how this is useful. I still don't see how you can make a working application using that. That's how I imagine it.
I think that you could make an application that works, but it would require a lot of work.
Well, define a lot of work. And why would it need a lot of work?
Because now when I see these basic functions, I think that everything you have to define it yourself.
A lot of things, yeah. So it's called business logic is what actually needs fine. Because programs, like the programming language with its standard library and built-in functions, will provide basic functionality like how to print a file. You don't really need to worry about how to convert this variable and so on, and how to represent this into the console, or how to read an input. All of that is provided to you. All you need to do is to actually code what is called business logic, which basically means what your application actually does. What's the purpose of your application? Because everything else, everything that's generic, will be provided by the libraries. Libraries either from programming language itself or external libraries. Like, for example, if we wanted to manipulate images, we would use an external library, and then we would just use it in a way our application needs. That would be the business logic part of the application. Yeah, I'm not sure that made any sense, but just the term business logic, meaning the actual essence, what your application actually does, what's unique about your application that it's doing. So that's the business logic part.
Okay. No, actually, no. Everything, well, not everything, maybe. I got the business logic, but part that I heard those words, I mean, but everything else just bounced off my mind. It's having a bit too much already.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, yeah, making some small application that does stuff will be a good next step. I think from that on, from there on, we can build on top of that, maybe expand it somewhat.
I think it will be a good step as well, because I will get some practice in how to use some functions or yeah.
Right. Yeah, we can do that. We learn new concepts. What will be needed? Basically, we can make a sample application, and maybe we can take a day off or two while you can make another application based on that. You need to solve the world before ending the stream. Oh, okay, that's correct. Yeah, we need to write a program for Wordle. That's that's what we should do. That will be my backup. I'll just get a dictionary, and we'll need to figure out. Yeah, that's what. Okay, that will be my suggestion. So if you come up with something you want to do, then we can do that. And I think my backup will be just making a dictionary of 5-letter words, and we can input letters, so it will filter out the words. So it will make it easier to guess. Because now I'm just looking at the words, like my dictionary is too weak. I need to actually think of the word, and then mentally count on my fingers how many letters there are in that word. Because English is weird like that, when you spell, like, certain words are spelled one way but pronounced the other way, so it doesn't really match the way you pronounce with the number of letters. So I guess if it's your native language, it's kind of natural, but for us in Lithuania, say, well, for me at least personally, like here in Lithuanian, words are spelled and pronounced the same way, pretty much. It's we use phonetical phonetical spelling, right? Let's see. So Wordle, what's the next word? Extra. That's a 5-letter word, but it uses 2 letters that I already have. Best. That's 4-letter word. Ooh, that's a good word. Chest. That gets a lot of letters. Oh, H is in the correct letter place. Oh, so I have all the 5 letters. So it has H, O, and it has R and T. Hmm. Wait, am I missing letters? No, I'm not. 5 letters and... Is it thorn? It can be. Yeah, it is thorn. Okay. Well, at least I know the word. The next word will be available in 3 hours, so tomorrow. Yeah, that will be a cool application. So that's something you can definitely make. Basically take a huge list of words and filter out 5-letter words, make it convert it into another file. So and then use that file as basis, like take some input, what letters are present, or even with the location in the word itself. Yeah, good idea. What do you think?
So basically, we need to download the dictionary and then work with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or any text. It doesn't have to be a dictionary. You just take a long text like a book and just go through that and use all of the words from the book and populate our like resulting dictionary using that as basis.
But that book might not contain all the words.
Yeah, it might not, but it will definitely contain enough. Enough to start with. Maybe we can make a program that basically exploits the map. So basically we use map to just push a bunch of words into the map and just use the key part. So only the unique words will be. So basically we make sure that we don't have duplicates and we just use the map keys. To store all the values. You don't really need to map it to anything actually. All of them can be mapping to none. You can copy the list from the console, it's on the site. Basically a 20,000 word list. Yeah, there are many ways to get it, but I think it would be more fun if you had to do some extra steps. Like it would be like extra practice to just filter out everything that's not a 5-letter word. And then maybe we can use dictionaries so we can process multiple files or even the same file. Oh, basically, so we can process another file, take another file, try to add that, another file. We can have like a whole list of files we use for list of words and use maps to make sure that we don't have any duplicates. And when we're done processing the files, we have like basically a dictionary with a bunch of words in it. Yeah, that's an easy project, I'd say. And you should have, well, maybe you don't really know how to use keys. Basically we will convert keys. Well, that's not important. I can explain that tomorrow if we go along with this, unless you find something more interesting.
I don't think that I will.
Maybe you will. Maybe there's something interesting with the OBDT or whatever its name. OBD2. That's the name of that.
Oh, well, it's the name of the current connection. OBD is the old one. OBD2 is the current one that most cars use. It's from 96 up.
Yeah, and imagine there's quite a lot of data there accessible because it is a standard of some sort. Like there's an agreed upon standard, what kind of data it has to be provided, how to acquire it, what can be set, how it can be set, and so on. Like there's a lot of stuff you can actually do with that. So maybe we could write even long term. We can think about writing an application to to interact with OBD2. Except you will be making the whole thing up. Like basically, you look at the standard, what's available, and then implement some sort of input-output and so on. So write your own software for car diagnostics.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's not out of the realm of possibility as well. Not something unimaginably hard that you need to learn like years of programming. Like study for years to actually be able to do something useful with it.
Because I imagine that other diagnostic programs also started like this. Well, at least similar like this.
Some of them, yeah, I imagine so. But yeah, the big companies, I imagine they have like the actual car makers. They have their own proprietary tools, and they put extra effort that you wouldn't be able to access certain information if you're not using like fancy tool that they provide and so on. But that's beside the point. Right. But I think we're done for today, right?
Yeah, I think I'm not gonna be able to learn anything more today.
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, I think we covered enough, so I think I'll end stream. Streaming live for how long?
A bit over 2 hours.
About 2 hours, yeah. I see my counter. Oh, I need to select. Yeah, almost 2 hours. Well, yeah, it's not the longest of streams. So. Right. Okay, see you, Risk. Hopefully we get the classes soon enough, so you will be able to learn something new as well. But yeah, for the next time we probably will be doing a program that helps me solve Wordle or something like that. Maybe you can...
Sounds like fun. Like
Yeah.
a fun project.
Yeah, it's really easy. Like you pretty much know everything you would need to solve it. So yeah, it's gonna be a breeze. Right. Okay, I'm stopping the stream.